So our first keynote speaker is someone who's dedicated his career to understanding how we can give every child the best start in life. James Cairns joins us from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, where he is the Senior Director for Strategic Engagement and Organizational Learning. Today, he is here to talk to us about creating supported development environments and how insights from science can drive collaborative approaches and help children to thrive. And James, the floor is yours.
It is a great pleasure to be here with you in Prague this morning. Thank you to the Places to Grow Hollis team for the invitation. What I want to do is take a few minutes and share the story of the science of early development. What are the principles that we have been gathering from a wide and diverse body of knowledge and research over many years that help us understand how children develop, what supports or threatens that development, and what can we do about it? So I hope this gets us started for a fruitful conversation during the day. Let me start, and much of this first bit will be familiar, I think, to many of us, but I want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. Over the last 25 or 30 years, we have been working with a set of core concepts that come heavily out of neurobiology, not exclusively, that really have been the grounding for the work we've been doing in early childhood policies and programs across the world. So the first principle is the idea of brain architecture, thank you, that when we're born, our brains have all of the cells and very few of the connections, the synaptic connections that make the brain function. And so our brains are being built over time, starting with basic connections and skills and more complex things. And so one of the most important concepts of this early stage of life that is distinctive is the rapid development of the structure and function of the brain that's governing everything else. The second concept is this idea of serve and return, that the way that our brains get built is interacting with our environments and the experiences that we as babies and as adults have. And so it's that back and forth interaction with adult caregivers and with the environment that is actually wiring our brains. And in a minute, I'll talk about it's also wiring other systems in our bodies. And then third, this idea of toxic stress, that what we've learned about the way that our stress response system functions, and that if our stress response systems are elevated for persistent action over time without that kind of serve and return responsive caregiving, that has damaging effects on our bodies. So these three concepts have been, I hope these are familiar to many of us, really at the heart of what's driven an important growth and flourishing of work in early childhood in terms of the importance of early development, the importance of responsive caregiving, and those relationships. So just emphasizing, why is early so important? That toddlers and infants aren't just little people. This is a distinctive period of human development. And it's really around this concept of plasticity. So when we are born, our brains, our bodies are the most open for adaptation and growth as they will ever be. And so over time, our brains get more specialized. And so it's harder to change things. It's not impossible. This is not determinative. But the earlier we do things well, that foundation we build early, the more efficient, the more effective that is for lifelong learning, health, behavior, and success. So what this is saying is that if we wait, it costs more. It costs more biologically, takes the body more effort to build those kinds of skills and capacities. It takes us as societies more money. All right, moment of honesty. How many of you went and found your age? All right. The good news of this slide is that yellow curve never goes to zero. So let me bring three slightly newer ideas into this conversation. First, it's not just about the brain. That actually, surprise, our bodies are a highly integrated set of biological systems. And so all that we've been talking about in terms of early experience, the effects of stress and adversity on brain development, are also part of how our bodies are responding, our immune systems, our metabolic systems, our cardiovascular systems. So think of it as a highly skilled team. Each of these systems in our body have a particular role to play, but it's all in service of success, of adaptation to our environment, of responding to stress, adversity, positive experiences. And so we need to understand that what we know about effects of stress and resilience aren't just about brain, but that early foundations around elevated inflammation, the overaction of our metabolic systems and what that does for things like diabetes 20, 30 years down the road. So the story that we need to tell isn't just about learning outcomes, that these are early foundations of lifelong health as well, physical and mental. And we know from growing bodies of research that something like excessive extended inflammation in the body is a precursor for heart disease, for diabetes, for depression, for Alzheimer's disease, right? So these are foundational concepts that this early period of development is setting sort of the foundations for what's going to happen across the life course, which makes timing really important. 4 is not early. Can we just all agree that 4 is not early anymore? And so what we know, not just in the brain, but in lung development, in other development of the systems, the sensitivity to environment and exposures is much greater younger than it is older for two basic reasons. One, the rapid pace of early development, and immature biological systems are just much more sensitive to what's happening in the environment. I think lead exposure is a classic example. Lead is toxic. The impact of a lead exposure if you're an infant versus a 20-year-old is significant and foundationally different. So we have to also understand there are things happening at periods of time in development that make exposures to things, good and bad, that much more important and dynamic as an infant versus a 10-year-old, a 10-year-old versus a 15-year-old, a 15-year-old versus a 30-year-old. So we really need to understand that this timing factor, we've talked a lot about epigenetics, gene and environment interaction. There's a third factor we have to always consider, which is timing. So the genetic, environmental, and timing relationship is critical in how development happens. And then the third piece, and I'm going to spend some more time on this, is this idea of developmental environments, that it's not just the environment of relationships, which is foundational, it's what's happening in the broader built and natural environments that surround us. And actually increasingly bringing in new and growing bodies of knowledge about how what is surrounding us is actually shaping us biologically and behaviorally. So what do we mean by developmental environments? So it's the combination of the experiences and exposures that influence a child. And so therefore, this developmental environment is everything that is this range of experiences, which I think is, we've talked a lot about experiences in terms of social interaction, in terms of early learning experience. It's also about the exposures in the broader environment, in the places where children grow. I love this is going to tie right into the theme of this whole initiative. And so let's look at a few of these. So the social environment is one that I think we are very familiar with. It's the important areas of relationships, family and community supports, cultural and faith traditions, all these things that are shaping that social interaction. I think this is a space, when we talk about built and natural environments, where we as a field in early childhood really need to start to look much more seriously and bring in some new partners to look at what's happening in terms of air quality, heat, water quality, green space, the built infrastructure of housing and transport. And what we know is there are things happening in those environments that are having a direct biological effect on kids in terms of what heat does to the body, in terms of, we know, water and nutrition, these kinds of things. Access, there's a growing body of research around the quality and importance of green space and being outside and access to those things. And then the third ring is the broader systemic influences. And here we need to take seriously that there are practices and policies and patterns in all of our societies that have shaped what children have access to and what they are exposed to, and that has not been distributed equally or randomly in our societies over time. So when we think now about this broader developmental environment in which children are growing up, I think is where we're going and where the science is pointing us and what we need to be taking into account. So what does this mean? So these environments, for any of us, are a combination of positive experiences and negative influences. That balance for each of us is different. And, as I was just saying, these are not randomly distributed. And so the quality of the developmental environment in which a children is growing up is heavily influenced by the policies in our societies, the social history of our societies. And so if we're not taking that piece into account, then we are likely, as we develop our strategies and solutions, missing opportunities to ensure that all children are getting the best opportunities for positive influence in their development. And we can think of sort of two big systemic kind of influences that we're focusing a lot on right now. Certainly in the United States, I know in Europe as well, these challenges of structural inequity in our societies, and then the broader influences of climate change. And in particular, I think on the climate change front, what we're seeing is that those factors in the natural environment and the built environment that affect our biology, our health, our well-being, are getting elevated, accelerated, worsened by the climate change effect, right? So we know that excessive heat has certain impacts on the body. If we have 10 days of excessive heat, that's one thing. If all of a sudden we have 30 days of excessive heat in a year, that's the dynamic now as the climate shifts take place. More extreme weather events and those kinds of things. And so all of these effects in the environment are having both a direct effect on children, those biological effects in terms of exposure to good things and bad things, and those same environmental effects are also affecting the adults. And so we have to understand the effect as a parent or as a teacher. If I'm suffering through extreme heat, how is that affecting my ability as a caregiver? And as we think about the caregiving environments we are creating, that all of these aspects of the broader developmental environment are having a direct effect on the child, and because they're also affecting the adults, are having an indirect in terms of the caregiving environment and capacities that are being provided. So I think we need to see that this is happening in both dynamics, and we have to pay attention to both of these if we really want to ensure we're creating as positive an environment as possible. So, this slide can be seen as an overwhelming challenge or a wonderful opportunity. So if you're an optimist or a pessimist, what this offers us is the need to broaden the list of areas that we start to think of as having an impact on child development. So as we think about developmental environments, it brings in issues like environmental protection, planning, housing, economic development, the legal and judicial systems that are shaping how we support or don't support families and parents. And so in this regard, I think if we want to go back and pick up the metaphor of the body as a set of individual athletes on a team, we have an opportunity to expand the team that sees its work as being directly related to shaping these positive environments for children. So we're not asking those of you who do early learning programs to all of a sudden become housing experts, or people in the health sector to have to worry about urban planning. What we're saying is that the folks who have those responsibilities in our systems and our societies, we're not asking them to become educators. We're saying the work that you do, the mandate you have in urban planning, in finance, in interior and justice, if you understand that you are also shaping and contributing to the developmental environment around children and families, it's an opportunity for you to be part of the team and to understand that all that we're doing is affecting and shaping the places where children grow. And so there is this sense now that we can open the space. The other thing, that if it's good for the kids, it's also good for everybody else. But don't tell anybody, right? If we're creating communities, environments, cities, towns, societies that are promoting this kind of development for our children, it's promoting healthy societies for all of us. And that's the investment. That the investment in the kids is not just in their future and our future as a society, it's actually investment in making the quality of life and the sustainability and prosperity of life better for all of us today. Thank you very much. And sorry, can you go back to that last slide just for a second? If you don't know our center's work, the website is here. Next slide. A vast array of materials, working papers, infographics, videos that go deeper into the things I spent 2 minutes on today, you can find. And I think we even have a couple of things that are in Slovak and Czech and so on. So we're trying to do things in multiple languages, and you can find us on many social media accounts as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James.